Welcome back to Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate Prowler only. Last time we took on Hyper Rathalos and Hyper Rathian in G rank. Not together, separately, but together in the same episode, I guess we could say. This time we'll be taking on some different monsters that don't really have much in common. Other than, I guess, maybe being a little creepy. I guess they could be considered a little creepy. First quest we're taking on is a name I'm not going to even try to pronounce. Has us hunting a Hyper Nerscylla in the Primal Forest. Go ahead and take the quest. We have our fire weapon equipped, and I'll head on out. Alright, our friend Hyper Nerscylla is being in the Primal Forest, and most maps that it's on, able to kind of play off of the verticality that it got from 4 Ultimate, and 4, I guess, as well. Not really going to be too difficult for us, because we can obviously just attack it while it's in the air, or on the ceiling, I guess. It can't really fly. But obviously, if you're using a Blade Master weapon, you'll have a more difficult-ish time actually hitting it. Elemental resistances are interesting as per usual. Fire works better when it has its hide up, but once you break the hide, thunder becomes better. I have a feeling we're probably going to have a pretty hard time breaking the hide anyways, and even after you break it, you still have a somewhat measly 5 fire weak spot, where it would normally be like 25 or something. So, while not particularly great, at least it's useful, unlike Thunder Element, which has no effectiveness until you get the hide off. With the reason being is that it's a Gypceros hide, which doesn't take any thunder damage. But again, I don't think I'll be able to break it off, at the very least, fast enough for Thunder Element to actually do more damage than Fire Element. Because part health is pretty high in this game, especially on Hyper monsters, so as long as we, can just kind of deal some consistent damage, I think we'll be fine. Just kind of a very melee-oriented monster. It does have some ranged attacks, but not really anything too scary. It just throws you into the web status, and that's about it. You can shake out of it pretty easily, or if you absolutely just want to, you can use a soothing roll and just get out of it that way. I don't really expect much from this monster, and I doubt even its hyper attacks are anything too special. So all I'm really going to do is just kind of stay at a middling range and throw boomerangs at its back to try to break the hide. Because I do know that you will get some decent damage there. I think the stomach and then the belly is technically what it's called. I assume that's like the abdomen. I don't know. Whatever the back is. And then the face is okay. The problem with the face is that it's guarded by those claws, which are a tough hit zone. So you don't want to actually go through those if you don't have to. Obviously, if you have like barrel bombs or something, you can break through them probably pretty quickly, since they're not particularly strong HP wise, since they're naturally tough, so they have to be balanced in, at the very least, a slight amount to be able to be broken with somewhat weaker hit zones and stuff like that. Not really many hyper spots on it either. It's just on the face right now. I'm sure it can get more later, and it may have one on a claw too. Oh no, it's on its back. It's kind of weird. I assume that maybe powers, I think it's on the back. I'm not sure what that powers up, maybe other than just like tackles and stuff. But it doesn't really do that many tackles. It's mostly just like claw swipes and stuff. That would be a tackle. But even then, I'm not sure if that powers it up or not. I didn't see this flash go off, but I don't know. We'll see. Again, there's not really much to say about this monster. She's just kind of there. She'll hang on the ceiling. I'll try to throw this out here. Obviously, if we get it to stagger in the air, that would be great. We can go ahead and throw this one out too, since we do have Go Fight Win. We can go ahead and do a bite. I think I'm at a safe distance. I believe that is a bit slower with the hyper on it, because I'm pretty instinctually trying to just dodge immediately after those get pulled out, but she's not doing it until quite a bit later. I'm gonna go up there. I think I'm safe to rev this up. I think so. Maybe should have aimed it down a little bit further. Be okay though. That's why we use them when they're cheap and not when they're expensive with those risky plays. Alright, got a break from something. I'm not quite sure what it was. Probably a leg if I had to guess, because I'm not seeing any damage on the spikes. Maybe even a claw. Actually, maybe like the outer, yeah, I think that's a leg break. So the outer hide is kind of shredded up, looks like a little bit. I think that's probably what it's from, so the legs may be taking more thunder damage now. But I don't know. She's not really putting up that much of a fight. I've got hit maybe a couple of times, and that's just because I was being greedy with Mega Boomerangs. Looks like she's leaving, so I'll go ahead and chase her to the next area. And don't forget that if she does stick her fangs out, you know, like closes them forward, that's a really good weak spot you can attack. I'm not sure how much fire damage it takes. It may just take the face it zone, which would only be 15, you know, compared to your standard like 25 on the hide and stuff like that. But even at that, it's still fine. It's fairly large, especially for other weapons that maybe don't have as easy of a time reaching the back or something like that. That is a pretty quick thing you can actually attack. And obviously, if you can, get your Mega Boomerang out and try to attack it after she finishes that attack, as long as you're out of the way of it, and that'll get some pretty good meaty damage off at the very least to maybe get a flinch or something. I have noticed that when you do attack the face a decent amount, she will fall over. However, I don't know if that's just for me piercing the legs or if she actually has a face topple, kind of like Mizutsune or something like that. You're up there now, attacking you. And you're not going to see the sleep needle hardly at all unless you are playing a Blade Master weapon, because it only comes from the Stinger. Very similar to Plesioth in that regard, where yes, you can be put to sleep, especially if you're not careful, but it's a fairly long tail, and it should be, because it's a sleep attack that debilitates you, especially as a cat, a lot easier than it would a hunter or something like that. But as long as you stay far enough away from it, you're never really in danger. I really would like it if you could get down. I guess you're dragging my cats up there, so I'll better go up there and actually fight you. All right, well, immediately after I climb back up here, I get a knockdown. Hopefully that goes down. Nope, it does just kind of recoil. I should be able to get at the very least one out, though. She'll get back up with this cycle here. Try to figure out where she's going and pierce. At the very least, get the back there, which is fine. It's good damage. I can do a couple of claw swipes, though. Stay away from that. Doesn't flinch me, so I can actually apply my buffs there and take very minimal damage, at the very least. It's doing a little fang, or bite. I guess those are fangs. I think they're fangs. I think that's what they're supposed to be. Now, I don't know how they extend like that. It's very creepy. But I don't know. It's fine. It gives us a bigger hitbox to hit at the very least, even if you do have to stay out of the way a little bit further. It's more scary with weapons that don't have a depth, but even then, obviously, once again, we're ranged. We're far enough away from it. We don't have to worry about it. And even in a case like that, we're taking so little damage from a hyper monster that it's just not really anything to make a big commotion about. You just take the hit and move on, heal off if you have to, or just kind of tank it and get a Mega Boomerang off if you absolutely want to. Got another part break. I assume that's going to be the spikes on the back. Yes. But even then, the hide's still there, so I don't think it's technically broken yet. Once it actually gets broken, the monster will be like completely like white. You know, I mean, that's just what the base monster looks like. So I think until you get that, and maybe not, maybe it counts once you break the spike. I just don't think so. In fact, I want to say, no, that's just her spikes. I don't actually quite know what that's counting as then. You have to break 2 of them, and it's not even showing a broken 1, which maybe that's the bite that she does. Maybe that's counted as a spike, and if you break 1, it shortens it. I think that's the case. I don't remember very well, though. You don't really fight her very much. It's a very similar case to most other monsters in the game. You don't fight them very much because the gear they make isn't, you know, top of the line. So you just kind of end up throwing them in the pile with the other mid-tier monsters that don't really have anything too great, unless you particularly like how their armor looks. Unfortunately, weapons are just kind of get left out in the cold because there's no layer weapon system. Well, in some cases, I think it's fine. In other cases, you know, it's just like, well, this is the meta weapon I get, and it looks like a big chunk of metal and very ugly. For cats, it's not as bad. Your meta weapons are actually pretty nice looking, like the Amatsu one. Even this one's pretty interesting looking. It's like a lance and a parasol kind of together. It's like a folded up parasol. I don't think it's supposed to be a folded up parasol. That's just kind of what it looks like to me. But it's most importantly a lance because, you know, that's what Ignector does. He digs out of the ground and his face is kind of like a lance when he hits you. Got another part break. Not quite sure what that one was either. Maybe that was the hide finally breaking off. No. And again, if this isn't what counts for the thunder damage, then I've been fighting her for 15 minutes and thunder damage would have little to no effect here. There are some body parts that naturally have a slight thunder weakness, kind of like the, 5 fire element that she takes whenever the hide is gone. There it is. Okay, this has got to be where the thunder element actually starts working. And again, 15 minutes at least, if not closer to 20 by now. I don't really think it's worth it. Obviously, the niche case where you're using a raw thunder weapon as a hunter and you just have the thunder element because it's part of the good raw weapon, so you're naturally just going to be dealing more damage once the hide breaks off. But at the same time, also applies the fire element before the hide's broken. So I don't really see much of a point in using thunder element. It is just kind of a weird thing. Unless part breaker isn't really that useful in the earlier games either, because you have to put so much effort into building it. And even in the later games, yeah, you can like slot a couple of 2-slot decos. I think that's what the part breaker ones are. There may be 1 slot in other games, but I don't really see that also being used outside of a couple of very niche scenarios. Like I think Safi Jiva is affected by it, Wolf Taroth, things like that, where you're trying to get points. But other than that, part breaker isn't particularly that useful as far as I've seen. Okay, well, that was an interesting shot from the Mega Boomerang. I was hoping it'd go up a little higher, but touching the leg very slightly finished it off. Now, that took 20 minutes, very shortly after 20 minutes, but I do want to remind you that is about how long Chameleos and Teostra were taking. So, yes, when I say that they're very similar to just kind of being an Elder Dragon version of the monster, not necessarily damage or aggression-wise, but just health-wise, that's kind of how they are. Keep in mind, though, that I am more used to fighting Teostra than I am to fighting a Hyper Nerscylla, so I'm a little bit more efficient on taking down a Teostra than I would be a monster like this. As you can see, I have a lot of gauge left over from my Mega Boomerangs that I could be using a lot more if I were more keen to the animations and stuff that I could use it during. Either way, guard her up. I'll go ahead and meet you back at base. All right, back to the hub. Go ahead and eat our meal. We have switched to our thunder weapon, which is, I guess, something the monsters I'm fighting today share. Like, at the very least, at the base level, share a weakness to thunder element, even though Nerscylla kind of has this little armor stipulation, I guess. Either way, the next monster we're hunting is called Nargacuga in the Jurassic Frontier, as us hunting a Nargacuga in the Jurassic Frontier at night. Go ahead and take the quest and head on out. All right, Hyper Nargacuga, and this one actually looks to be pretty small, which is good for us. We don't like large melee monsters because they do kind of cover the entire area. And maybe I'm just used to Silverwind being so large, but this one seems to be a small crown at the very least, and it may not be. This one has about 15,000 HP. Now, to put it in perspective, like I said before, Nerscylla took a little bit longer than Teostra would have, or not a little bit longer, but about the same time, maybe a bit less, just from what I'm remembering. And Nerscylla had about 14,000 HP. I think maybe like 14,040, I think was the exact number. So about 1,100 less than this one has. And then Teostra actually has about 13,000, sorry, and a half. It can fluctuate. Hyper monsters can't fluctuate, but the Elder Dragons can. So it can be like 13,250 to like 13,700 something. So while yes, Teostra is more aggressive, Teostra is not more tanky. You know, he'll take more damage from stuff naturally just because he's special in the regard that his legs are weak. So they're actually pretty easy to hit, and they're the back legs, so they're fairly safe. And that's kind of the spot you're going for. Yes, you can attack the head, but the back legs are very easy just to hit naturally. As opposed to Nerscylla, which kind of has a protected head. And then, yes, her stomach is weak and pretty easy to hit, especially being so large. But that's the only spot you do get to hit. And then Nargacuga here being kind of similar to Nerscylla's head, having it kind of put in between two different hard spots. So while a Blade Master weapon might have an easier time hitting the head, for us, we kind of don't have as much precision. So we may end up clipping the wings and stuff and dealing less damage there. However, obviously, once we break the wings, we'll get a topple, which would be nice for a Mega Boomerang if we get enough. And obviously, since they're applied with Hyper, they'll get that damage increase. Not from him, obviously from him, but for us as well, we'll deal more damage to them, which will make the breaking easier, which will obviously end up with more damage. As long as we can topple him over. It's going to lunge here. Now, I think this is definitely one of the more fun fights, because naturally, Nargacuga is just a fun fight in general, so I don't think him having more health is necessarily a detriment. Nerscylla, again, not the most interesting monster to fight compared to the other monsters you can fight. You know, I think this is a good contrast. It's a fast monster that's nimble. He's going to be jumping around all over the place. And even again, if his damage isn't the highest in the world, he's still something you've got to stay on your toes for and watch out for those surprise hops like that. I knew it was coming. I just dodged to the right, and it didn't carry my iframes long enough to actually get the adept dodge off. So that's okay, though. I'm just going to keep working on these wings since I do have the hyper applied to them and hopefully get a break, but I'm more or less just trying to go for full gauge and then start using Mega Boomerangs. I apologize, I can't speak today. I can't normally speak, but seems to be worse. All right, get hit by those. He's going to lunge again. I'm going to go ahead and try to Soothing Roll. However, we've got thrown into Enrage, so that'll give us a little bit of affinity and faster speed as per usual. Nothing too out of the ordinary for that. Looks like he's just going to taunt here. That's great for us. He's not enraged anymore, so as always, if it's a Nargacuga that's not enraged, you can throw a Sonic Bomb to get a flinch. Of course, we don't have Sonic Bombs, so as per usual, we don't really make use of that mechanic. I don't really know if there's any ideal scenarios that you really want to use that in. Obviously, I guess if you're pinned or if a teammate's pinned, you can throw it to get it off of them. But, you know, if you're pinned, you just throw a Dung Bomb at them if you have them. And if you don't, you just kind of wiggle out of it. He's going to hop here. There we go. Keep dodging to the right. Obviously, if our barrel bombs do hit those, that's fine because they deal fixed damage. So they don't deal that much, but they will at the very least make it take less hits, I'm sure, on average, as we slowly kind of chew through his HP here. Always whenever he jumps to the side, I try to assume he's going to do a hop. Even if he doesn't, we're pretty safe for the most part. So as long as we just try to time the dodge with the lunge, you should be pretty good, and maybe even be able to actually counter with a Mega Boomerang after. As you can see, that's a very long animation, and he had to taunt after, so very easily exploitable attack once you get used to the flow of the fight. And again, since he's hyper, his timings are going to be a bit different from regular Nargacuga, so you do still have to stay on your toes, whether or not he's going to throw out a slow attack or a fast attack. Comes a sweep. He's probably going to do another one. Nope, just going to stand there. He would have continued it a little bit faster if he was going to. Won't reach me, so I can actually continue the onslaught here. I'm going to dodge forward. He's going to actually go into Enrage. I think this is close enough. He may lunge at me, so that might actually make up the difference. He does. Bit of an awkward spot, though. I'm going to go ahead and throw this one out. Dodge to the right. He's going to lunge. Dodge into it. Again, just always assume if he does a side hop, he's going to do a lunge. He can do lunges sometimes without the side hop, but the side hop lunge is the scariest version of them because it can kind of blindside you. All right, he's going to hop to the side once more. There goes the lunge. Can't really do much if you're stuck in a boomerang animation, so the main thing is just trying not to be too greedy with your attacks. Tail actually does count as a hit. Sorry, let me lose my acorn here. It does count as a hitbox, so even if his core or front body, I guess, is the one that's attacking, the tail can kind of hit you. And it's very, I actually talked about this last time, where if he'll do the tail sweep attack, his arm actually still counts as a hitbox. So you can adept it if you want to. And if you're not adept, then you do want to stay away from it because it can knock you back a little bit and get you out of the way of the nice, sweet face hit zone. Now, obviously, yes, he does have 15,000 HP, but he's a Nargacuga. He's pretty frail anyways. He's not like Silverwind. Silverwind is very tanky. His face, I don't believe, is a weak spot. So you're really trying to rely on your elemental damage to do a lot there, where your raw damage really can't do that much. It may be a weak spot with blunt weapons, but mainly for us, it's not. So you're just kind of having to deal with bad hit zones. Try to dodge that lunge there. And as you can see, he's kind of catching me off guard with these lunges. Even though I'm trying to dodge with them, he's still kind of going over me and then hitting me by the time the iframes end. So if I were more aggressive, I could dodge into them and try to trigger them consistently and reliably, but when you do try to play passively, it will end pretty badly if you're, you know, just kind of being sloppy with it, not focusing too much on your positioning. Got a face break there. That's pretty good, but it just does go to show how weak his face is compared to his arms, obviously, because his arms are hard parts. Got a knockdown earlier, and again, after he's Nargacuga. If you've played, like, at the very least one of the half of the games in the series, you're probably going to run into him and know what his major tells are. Tail Slam, that's a very easy one to combo a Mega Boomerang after. Just make sure he does the second one and he doesn't just do one into something else. Or, you know, does one into the Tail Slam again, and then you get hit by it. That still does a lot of damage, and obviously, if the Hyper Spot is on the tail, it's going to be dealing even more. So you do want to just stay out of the way of those. I'm going to try to heal back up here, make sure I'm closer to full at the very least. He's going to lunge a couple of times, stay out of the way. And obviously, if you're trying to use your melee swipes as a positioning tool, make sure you're not near the arms. I don't even know if Purple Sharpness, you know, makes you immune to bouncing on them, but I have bounced a couple of times on the arms, just by nature of the fact that he's trying to close distance. So you're going to be close to him and possibly hitting them, since they are a fairly large hitbox. At the very least, being able to hit them wise. Do a tail sweep there, couple here. Flipping the back there, not a great hit zone, but it's okay. I think it shares the same hit zone as the body. In fact, I don't even think there's a back hit zone. I think it's just the body hit zone. It's fairly standard. Get another break from our cats. I believe that's the tail being broken. So now it can be cut off as long as he's in enraged mode. If he's not enraged, then, you know, it's weird. It can't be cut off. Not quite sure how that works. I guess the spikes are just that tough that you can only break it once it's been chipped a little bit. But now that it is, we can go for that if we really wanted to. But once again, Nargacuga is in a very similar boat to most of the monsters in the game. Like I said before, is just kind of outclassed by Silverwind if you're wanting to use a high affinity boomerang weapon. And if not, you know, you've got other high raw options that don't necessarily lean into affinity, but still are very decent on the raw side. There finally goes the leg break. Took quite a while to get it, but we'll get a short topple here, and that's great. Again, you're not going to be getting a lot of actual damage up from that. Not like, you know, dealing more damage, but just like damage uptime. You know, they're fairly quick, especially on the monsters with easy part breaks, easy to reach part breaks. I'll say it like that. You know, Glavenus is also similar, being a Brute Wyvern. Brute Wyverns in general also have a very fast get up animation, as opposed to, you know, Flying Wyverns, which usually, you know, flail around for a bit. But Nargacuga doesn't do that, and that may be a hyper thing too. He may actually linger on the ground for a bit longer in his regular state. But, you know, not the end of the world. Again, obviously you can get a Mega Boomerang out each time. You may not be getting out two. That would be the ideal, but yeah, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't matter that much. Also got the tail cut finally. I'm not really focusing on any specific part other than the face, so any kind of collateral I'm getting is a bonus, which is kind of just normally how you play it, especially the Mega Boomerangs being as unwieldy as they are. All right, many minutes later, he's limped to this place. He hasn't slept here though. I don't remember where he sleeps on this map. I want to say it's here, but I don't know. Maybe he just got really upset for whatever reason and he can't fall asleep. I'd be pretty upset too if my tail were cut off, if I had a tail and my arms are like chipped and my face had a scar on it. That wouldn't be very pleasant. So I don't think I'd be able to sleep very easily either. But again, other than that, yeah, a really fun fight just in general. He's not a complete and total pushover. I've been being hit quite a few times. Looks like he's leaving areas again. And I've had to heal quite a few times as well, just because he's not going to let you rest too much. Got a nice little air dunk there. That's similar to the Zinogre one I talk about all the time, where you can just kind of knock him out of a lunge he's going for. It looks very funny, but it is also pretty nice to be able to combo something out of it. But yeah, and again, his main damage that he's dealing with like individual attacks isn't that high, but he can combo you. But you know, that's kind of his whole thing. He's fast. He's going to hit you a bunch of times. He's not going to let you breathe too often. And the main damage that you're getting are the times where you actually can breathe and, you know, hit him with some stuff if you're not having to heal. It is a very nice flow even if, you know, he's still not the hardest thing in the world, I certainly 100% enjoy him way more than Silverwind. Silverwind's just annoying. So he acts kind of in the opposite pattern, where instead of trying to close distance, he's creating distance, so you have to close the distance, and just kind of ends up not being that fun. I know Blade Master users a lot of the time say that it feels very similar to regular Nargacuga, but I guess just by proxy of being a very weak weapon damage-wise, you feel a lot more of the very high HP and the defense not being that low on the monster itself, and taking a while to kill, so the annoyances of the monster are multiplied by quite a bit. Either way, taking him down, I'll go ahead and carve him up, and I'll meet you back at base. Alright, back to the hub, and that did actually end up being a small crown Nargacuga, so that's pretty nice. I want to say I may have had one before, but doesn't really matter that much. I'm not going after crown farming. That is very much a I have nothing else to do, so I might as well do this goal. First weapon we're going to look at is the Silhouette XR Cross R. Melee attack is 179 with 32 poison element and I believe 20% affinity. So blue sharpness, not great. Doesn't affect your status like it would with element, so you're still dealing the same amount of status. However, 179 is not that great for a blue sharpness weapon. Yes, the 20% affinity is nice. I will say that much, but I want to say our Rathian weapon's just better. It doesn't have the positive 20% affinity, but you get white sharpness, you get almost 20 more raw. You lose some poison element, but you can't really do much to apply poison element too many times, because once you apply it like the third or fourth time, you're probably not going to be getting it again unless it's like a very long and drawn out fight, or your main goal is just to apply poison for whatever reason. Unfortunately, there's no skills in this game that make poison stronger. That would be pretty cool though. As for the boomerang side, it's just even worse. You lose 12 poison element and however much raw that is, so obviously you're not using it because it is a close range weapon. As for the Nargacuga Cross R, only 171 melee attack. We're not worried about that. As for the boomerang side, 189 with 30% affinity and white sharpness. This is pretty okay. May, in some scenarios, before you actually fight Silverwind, or if you don't want to fight Silverwind at all, actually be using this for a raw weapon. However, there are better raw options, and obviously cats like element. So you can probably get by on an easier to make element option and still deal a similar amount, if not more damage. And especially for something like Bloodbath, where that's the better raw weapon in this scenario, especially considering it's deviant, so you get more gauge gain from it. You're probably not going to be using this much unless you just really fancy the design of it and you're not too far into endgame where it's going to hurt you too much. However, again, element's just going to be, you know, better overall. Even if you're running crit boost, you lose so much on your other skills that it really just doesn't end up being that worth it. And just as a contrast, the Guild Caliber Cross has 5% less affinity, but still has more raw. So, and even then on the melee side, it's the same as the boomerang side, so you're better in that regard as well. I think this one may be slightly harder to make than the Nargacuga Cross R. I don't think so though. I think this one's actually probably easier because you have an easier pick of just random materials that you can make. So if you're gonna be making a weapon, I think you make this one, unless you just really like the design of the Nargacuga, but I like the design of this one as well. And in fact, I actually like this one better. It looks pretty cool. As for the armor, don't expect too much. It's just going to be your middle of the road stuff. 142 defense, -10 thunder resistance, and just kind of middling positive resistances. So not that useful. And I'm actually really surprised the fire resistance is that low, because yes, Narga does take some fire damage, but not that much. And for the Silhouette Cross R, it's the same 142, only -8 thunder resistance, and not really good positive resistances either. So I guess while you're taking less thunder and fire damage, you're not really getting much else in that regard as well. And obviously, if you like the design, just make the regular version because it's easier. Either way, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider leaving a comment below and maybe even consider subscribing. Until next time, bye.